Dear children, we will move on to the next topic of the chapter Producer Behavior and Supply, and the next topic is Law of Supply and the supply schedule and the supply curve. Supply schedule, you know, it is a table which shows the different factors which affect the supply, the relationship between supply and the price. Then the supply curve which is drawn on the basis of supply schedule and the law of supply. Now let us first discuss with the supply schedule. What is a supply schedule? You have learned it is a table which shows the different quantities supplied at different prices. Now what is the relationship between a supply and a price? You have learned the relationship between demand and price. What is the relationship? When the price increases, the consumers will demand less, and when the price decreases, consumers will demand more. Okay. Likewise, there is a relationship between supply and the price. What will be the relationship? Now, in the case of demand and price, both are inversely related. Both are moving in an opposite direction. But whereas in the supply, both the price and supply are positively related. Now, the producers will be tempted to sell more in the market only if the price is high. And if the price is less, producers will not be tempted to sell more in the market. So we can say when the price increases, the supply of the producers increases, and when the price falls, the supply of the producers also will fall. So there exists a direct relationship between supply and the price. Now with that, we will see the supply schedule. So normally a schedule is a table which shows the values. So which all values will be there? The values of supply and the values of price. So what is a supply schedule? It is a table which shows various quantities of commodities being supplied by the producer at various prices during a given period of time. So during a given period of time, what is the quantity supplied by the producer in the market? The table which shows that relationship is known as a supply schedule. Now there are two types of supply, just as we discussed with demand. There are two types of supply schedule. One is individual supply schedule and one is market supply schedule. Now how will you explain individual supply schedule? A table which shows the different quantities of commodities supplied by a producer. But whereas market supply schedule, how we will explain it? It is a table which shows the different quantities of commodities supplied by different producers or sellers or firms in the market. So when we speak about market supply, 2 or 3 firms or more number of producers or more sellers. When we speak about individual, only one producer. Okay, that is the only difference between individual supply schedule and market supply schedule. So how will you explain an individual supply schedule? It is a table which shows the various quantities of commodities being supplied at various levels of price during a given period of time by a producer. So you can add here as by a producer. Likewise, how will you explain market supply schedule? It is a table which shows the various quantities of commodities being supplied at various levels of prices during a given period of time by different producers in the market. So that is the only difference that you need to make in the definition. So there are two types of schedule. One is the individual supply schedule and one is market supply schedule. Now here is a schedule which I have prepared for you. This is an example of an individual supply schedule. Price is given as 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. Supply is given as 5, 10, 15, 20 and 25. Let us learn one by one. At a price of 1 rupee, supplier is ready to sell 5 kilograms of commodity. At a price of rupees 2, price has increased from 1 to 2, the quantity supplied also has increased. So when the price increases, the producers are tempted to increase the sale. So when the price increases, supply also increases. So there exists a direct relationship between the price and supply. So this is an individual supply schedule which shows a supply only of one individual. Now let us move on to market supply. This is a market supply schedule. Now, here there are two firms I have taken. There will be more number of firms, but due to limitation, we are taking only two firms here. One is firm A and the other one is firm B. Now, for price 1 rupee, the firm A is selling 5 kilograms, but firm B may sell 10 kilograms. So, different producers have different tactics of sale and it differs. It is not necessary or it is not as compulsory that every producer should sell the same quantities here at one particular price. Now, at price rupees 2, when the price increases for the product from 1 rupee to 2 rupees, firm A is selling 10 kilograms and firm B is selling 20 kilograms. So, we can find at different prices what all quantities are sold out by these two sellers, firm A and firm B. Now, how will you find out the market supply here? When we add the firm B and firm A's quantity, we will be getting the market supply. So, 10 plus 5 will give you 15. So, this is the market supply. Okay, now we will move on to the supply curve. When we graphically represent this schedule, we will call it as supply curve. So, supply curve is a graphical representation of supply schedule. So, we will have to draw both individual supply curve as well as market supply curve. Now, based on the table which I have shown you before, individual supply schedule. So, this is individual supply schedule 1, 5, 2, 10, 3, 15, 4, 20 and 5, 25. So, based on that, I have drawn the supply curve. So, at price 1, 5 is the quantity. At price 2, 10 is the quantity. At price 3, 15 is the quantity sold out. At price 4, 20 is the quantity sold out. At price 5, 25 is the quantity sold out. So, after joining these points, see, I am getting a curve which is upward sloping curve. This is the supply curve. Now, my question is, why the supply curve is upward sloping? And I have told you, if any two variables are moving in the same direction, you will be getting an upward sloping curve. So, the two things that you have to keep in mind is demand curve is downward sloping curve because there exists an inverse relationship between demand and price, but whereas the supply curve is a positively sloped curve because both supply and price are positively related. So, we can find only one supply curve here because it is an individual supply schedule. Based on the individual supply schedule, we have drawn this figure and the curve. Now, we will move on to market supply curve. Now, here I have three curves. One is the curve of firm A, one is of firm B and the other one is market supply curve. How do you get market supply curve? By adding the supply of both firm A and firm B. Now, I have drawn that curve on the basis of this particular table. So, here I have represented both firm A and firm B. I have drawn the supply curve of firm A and firm B individually in the same diagram and together but represented both firm and firm B independently, and the market supply curve is also represented in the same figure. Now, here I have not drawn a separate diagram for firm A, firm B and market supply. I have represented all these three curves in the same figure. Why is it so? To make you understand what is the difference between the individual supply curves and a market supply curve. Here you can find the market supply curve is more flatter than the other one. Why is it so? Answer is so simple, because market supply is the addition of both firm A and firm B. So, automatically it will be flatter than the other curves. So, same as what we have explained for demand curve, market demand curve. Okay. So, this is all with regard to the market supply curve. Now, we will move on to the next topic, that is law of supply. What is law of supply? Just as the law of demand that we have learned, we need to learn about the law of supply. What is this law of supply? Law of supply says that other things remaining the same, the supply is directly related to the price. Now, what do you mean by that? What are the different factors which affect the supply? You can just recollect what all you have learned regarding the factors affecting the supply. Factors affecting the supply are price of that product. Second one is technology. Then prices of raw materials, objectives of the firm, government policies. You learned all these points in the last video. If the prices of the raw materials are high, supply will be less, isn't it? If the government policies are favorable to the producers, then producers will increase the supply. So all these are the factors which affect the supply, and we wrote about the supply function too. So recollect those points, and with that we will explain the law of supply. So law of supply says that other things remaining the same, that means no change in the other factors, only price is directly related to, so other things remaining the same, the supply and price are directly related. So other than the price, which are the other factors? Government policies, objectives of the firm, raw materials, all these are the other factors. So keep all other factors to be constant. If you are assuming like that, the price, the first factor which affects the supply, the price is directly related to supply. It is clear from the table which I have explained to you, isn't it? So all other factors remaining to be constant, price is directly related to supply. How price is directly related to supply? When the price increases, supply increases. When the price decreases, supply decreases. Now that is law of supply. Now just as we have learned for the change in demand and change in quantity demanded, we need to learn the same for the topic supply too. And the topic is change in supply and change in quantity supplied. It is a very important topic from the examination point of view. Either demand or supply can be asked. Okay, so change in quantity supplied and change in supply. Now you can recollect all the points which you have learned in the demand curve. If you are thorough with the demand, this supply also will be very easy for you. Now the change in quantity supplied and change in supply. Now let us, I have written it in the form of a table which I have done the same way for the demand. Okay, change in quantity supplied and change in supply. Let us see what is change in quantity supplied. It happens when the price changes provided other factors remaining to be constant. So change in quantity supplied happens when the price changes. Other factors will be constant. Which are the other factors? Just now I told you, objectives of the firm, government policies, raw materials, etc. Now change in supply happens when the price remains constant. But whereas in change in supply, price will remain constant, other factors will change. Which are the other factors? Government policies, objectives of the firm, raw materials, etc. So in change in quantity supplied, price will change, other factors remains constant. But whereas in change in supply, price will remain constant and other factors will change. So that is the difference. Now the second point is, in change in quantity supplied, there is a movement along the supply curve. There is a movement along the supply curve. So how is the supply curve? An upward sloping curve. In that upward sloping curve, there is movements. Two movements takes place. Okay, so movements takes place along the supply curve. Now, but whereas in change in supply, what happens? Here in change in the supply, change in other factors causes supply curve to shift. Okay, so here the movement is not along the supply curve. Here shift of the supply curve will take place. Okay, either to the left or to the right. So in change in quantity supplied, movement takes place along the same supply curve, but whereas in the other side, the shift in the supply curve will take place. Now the next one is, in change in quantity supplied, two actions takes place. They are expansion and contraction. Expansion and contraction, movement along the same supply curve. So which are the two movements, two actions taking place there? Expansion and contraction. But whereas in change in supply, the two actions taking place are increase and decrease of supply. Why increase and decrease? Because there is a shift of the supply curve. Now the next one is, the two movements taking place here in change in quantity supplied are the upward movement and the downward movement. I told you there are two actions and the movement is taking place along the same supply curve. So, the two movements are downward movement and upward movement, and the two actions are expansion and contraction, and the two actions are expansion and contraction. Now, here you can find there are two movements. The two movements are leftward movement and rightward shift. So, in change in quantity supplied, the two movements are upward and downward movement, which is expansion and contraction, but whereas in change in supply, the two movements are leftward shift and rightward shift. Now, let us be clear with the diagram drawn for these two concepts, change in quantity supplied and change in supply. Now, let us see from the first point. Change in quantity supplied happens due to change in the price. Yes, that is proved from this diagram. Price is changed from 5 to 10, 10 to 15, 15 to 20. At different prices you can find the different quantities supplied. At 5, quantities 1, at 10, quantities 2, at 15, quantities 3, and at 20, quantity has increased to 4. So, the change in quantity supplied happens when there is a change in the price. It is true. Now, a change in supply, this is change in quantity supplied and this is change in supply, happens when the price remains to be constant and only other factors are changing. When other factors are changing, see how the supply is also increased and decreased. Okay, now next point is, here in change in quantity supplied, the actions takes place along, or the movement takes place along the same supply curve. See, you can see the two actions taking place here are expansion and contraction. What is this expansion? Producer is expanding his supply. When do the producer expand his supply? Only when the price increases. The producer will contract his supply when a contraction takes place, when the price reduces. So, when the price is reducing from 10 to 5, the producer is reducing the supply from 2 to 1. When the price is increased from 15 to 20, producer is increasing the quantity from 3 to 4. So, here to this side, upward portion shows expansion and the downward portion shows contraction. Now, here you can find the movement is not taking place along the same supply curve, but instead of that, there is a shift of the supply curve to the right and to the left. If suppose we are taking this particular supply curve as a point of study, to this side there is leftward shift and to this side there is a rightward shift. If it is a leftward shift, what do you understand from that? Quantity has decreased from 15 to 10 and 10 to 5. If it is a rightward shift, we can see quantity has increased from 15 to 20 and 20 to 25. This is known as increase and here it is known as decrease. So, here in change in quantity supplied, movement takes place along the same supply curve with the two actions, expansion and contraction, but whereas in change in supply, the movement is not taking place along the same supply curve. Instead of that, supply curve will shift to the left and to the right, causing decrease and increase. Now, here the two movements are, next point, upward movement and downward movement, but here the two movements are leftward shift and rightward shift. So, here you can find the prices remaining constant, other factors are changing like raw materials. Prices of raw materials has increased. Therefore, we can say the producer has decreased his production from 10 to 5. Okay. If the prices of raw materials has decreased, the production has increased from 10 to 25. That should be the conclusion that we have to arrive. So, the most important point that you have to keep in mind is, in change in quantity supplied, price will change. In change in supply, price remains to be constant. So, I hope the difference is very clear to you with the diagram. Now, this is all about the this is all about regarding the law of supply, then supply schedule and supply curve, and change in quantity supplied and change in supply.